Predict, pick, and prevail in your fantasy football leagues with Nick Giacobbe and Nick Cap. From breakouts to busts, superstars to sleepers, these are the guys that will help you achieve fantasy glory. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to Season 4, Episode 3 of the PrimeTime Fantasy Football Podcast, where we give you our predictions, our picks, with the hopes that we help you prevail throughout the 2024 fantasy football season. I'm your host, Nick Giacobbe. Joining me, as always, is Nick Cap. Nick, it is July 28th. We're recording. It's Sunday, and I think we're 6 Sundays away. I think my math is correct. I have to check my calendar app on my phone, but I think we're 6 Sundays away from the first Sunday of the 2024 football season.
That's correct. We're about 40 days out from opening game. It is a wonderful time, and it comes right off the back of the Olympics this year. So at least our summer isn't too sports deprived. But, having no football for half the year, it is a difficult time to be a fan.
I think our Hall of Fame game is it Thursdays or next Thursday? I think it's this Thursday, August.
It's coming up. It's soon.
1st or something. It's this week or next week. So we're right there. Everybody's starting to mock draft. I know a couple of my friends are texting me that they're starting to mock draft. So the fantasy football preseason or pre-draft process is in full swing. It's time to start giving you guys some fun segments. Time to start talking about sleepers, busts, breakouts, and everything else. But we do have a really fun show planned today. We'll talk about that in a second. A fun segment that we did a couple years ago, and that's what we have in store for you guys today to help that pre-draft process and help to get you to the next level of fantasy football thinking. So without further ado, we are the PrimeTime Fantasy Football Podcast. You can find us on all major podcasting platforms, anywhere where you get your audio podcasts. If you prefer an audio and video show, you go to our YouTube channel, PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. Make sure you subscribe anywhere that you do listen or watch. You can also find us on all major social media channels at PrimeTimeFFPod, Facebook PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. Make sure to follow that page so you can follow our streams on Facebook throughout the season. We also stream live on Sunday mornings. Haven't decided a time yet, but during the season, Sunday morning stream, make sure to join us for that. So we're doing hot takes today, and we do hot takes a little bit differently. This is a segment that we came up with a couple years ago, and we're going to do this again this season because we think it's a lot of fun. So me and Nick are each going to give you 10 hot takes, and each take is going to get hotter and hotter. So we call it 10% to 100%. I'm sure Nick's going to make some really fun graphics like he did a couple years ago. So basically, keep in mind, none of these things are probably supposed to happen. So each take is it's not me and Nick saying, well, this is definitely going to happen. It's this could possibly happen. And we're going to give you reasoning as to why we think each of these takes from 10% to even our 100% could hypothetically possibly happen. And if so, it could alter your fantasy football season in a positive or a negative way. So we're going to start from bottom to top, I guess, or lowest to highest, and that's the best way to go. So, Nick, what is your 10% hot take, your lowest possible hot take for the 2024 fantasy football season?
So I'm going to say that I back my hot takes. I don't know if all of them are going to hit, but I am so confident from the research I've done and the work I've put into this that we're going to have a few this year that we're going to clip a year from now, and you're going to see it and be like, wow, Nick nailed it. You're not going to see the other 7 or 8 that I don't hit, but you will see the 1 to 2 that I do. And the first one, not as hot as the rest of them, but something I truly think is going to happen. I think we're going to see a bounce back season from Najee Harris. I think he's going to finish within the top 12. Right now, he's currently going off the board at 24, but the Steelers have totally revamped that offense in the last year. Russell Wilson, a check down king, should lead to higher receptions for Najee. Arthur Smith, a great offensive run scheme coach, is going to utilize both of those pass rushers, or both those running backs. And Najee Harris has had over 250 carries for the last 3 straight seasons. So if you're telling me they should have an uptick in QB production, they should have a better offensive line, and they have a better offensive play caller, I think Najee's in a perfect spot in your draft to exceed that expectation and possibly finish within the top 10. I'm going to go with top 12.
There you go. And also, I want to add to Nick's point, Russell Wilson has produced a ton, or maybe not produced, but he's played with a ton of top 10, top 15 running backs. You're looking at guys like Marshawn Lynch and even Thomas Rawls and Chris Carson. I don't think he was not there for Kenneth Walker, but those are 3 guys I just named that were top backs in fantasy. So my 10% hot take is I tell everybody pre-draft every single year to fade Mahomes. And if you did fade Mahomes last year, you probably benefited because Mahomes finished the season as your quarterback 8. If you waited on your quarterback, you probably got a better quarterback than Patrick Mahomes. And my actual hot take is that he will not finish within the top 5 at the end of week 18. He's currently being drafted as the quarterback 3. I believe he's behind Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts. Kind of depends on your draft. But there's a lot of talent at quarterback and a lot of talent. I mean, right off the top, I'm thinking about Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, reigning MVP, CJ Stroud, who had a phenomenal year last year, is looking to take a big second step this year. Jalen Hurts, again, a lot of rushing touchdowns. I know I won't be behind Jason Kelce, but still, the rushing touchdowns, should still happen. Dak Prescott, ultimate stat sheet stuffer. Joe Burrow should throw for a lot of yards, especially if he's healthy. Those are just a couple of guys off the top of my head. But then even last year, I'm pretty sure that Jordan Love snuck in the top 5, or maybe he was 6. Brock Purdy totally outperformed expectations. So I just named the stars that could be in the top 5, but there's going to be 1 or 2 outliers that could also sneak their way in there, including a bunch of, I think it was 5 rookie quarterbacks got drafted within the first round of the NFL draft. So with all that said, Patrick Mahomes hasn't really gained or lost anything. I know they drafted Xavier Worthy, but it's kind of the team that he's coming back with. So I just don't see him finishing as a top 5 quarterback. So I do see this hot take being very plausible to actually happen. What is your 20% hot take?
So I'm going with one that I think a lot of people have backed for a few seasons now, and here's the year I think it's finally going to pay off. I'm going with Kyle Pitts finishing within the top 5 at tight end. Nick called a few of those quarterback stat sheet stuffers. Well, look at Kirk Chains. I mean, that guy for 5 years in Minnesota has averaged 4,200 yards per season and over 30 touchdowns. So when you want to talk about filling a stat sheet and it leaned to no production, sounds perfect for an Atlanta Falcons quarterback, honestly. Fits right in that Matt Ryan role. And Kirk has produced numerous top pass catching seasons. You look at Hawkinson last year for the tight end, but outside of that, the number 1 pass catcher for the 5 years with Kirk Cousins has had over 1,100 yards and 6 touchdowns in each of those seasons between a mix of Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs, and Justin Jefferson. I'm not saying Kyle Pitts is that level of talent, but if he's going to be the number 1 or 1B with Drake London over there, he is going to fill some of that 4,200 yards and 30 touchdowns as long as Kirk is even close to 100%. And I probably would have had a hotter take and said Drake London would be finished near the top, but I just don't love his ADP right now. I couldn't really back it. He's being drafted in the middle of the end of the second round. But Kyle Pitts going 4 or 5 rounds later at that value, I think he's got the most upside to be the tight end 1, tight end 2 on the year, but I think he can comfortably finish in the top 5 if Kirk is at least 80 to 90% of what he was 2 years ago.
I'm just fading the Chiefs on the show. So my second hot take here is that Travis Kelce will not finish as a top 3 tight end for the first time since 2015. He's going to regress at some point. I'm not sure if this is the year for the full Kelce regression, but he's going to be 35 by the end of the year. He suffered an injury at the beginning of last season. I can't predict an injury, but injuries could also happen to kind of make this take come true. But the thing that's really helping me lean on this take is that I think there's a lot of talent at tight end this year. I don't think it's Travis Kelce or bust, where it's kind of been for a couple of years before that. It was Rob Gronkowski or bust. I think this is the most talented tight end pool we've had in the NFL in a long time. I believe Kelce was the tight end 1, or he's been 1 or 2 for the past, I'd say 8 years. He got dethroned last year by rookie Sam Laporta. Laporta's not going anywhere, so there's 1 off the board already. Mark Andrews is having a really good season last year before he got hurt, and he's coming back, and the Ravens have a little bit of a revamped and more high-powered offense. George Kittle is still hanging out with the 49ers. There's a lot of talent on that offense, but if they trade Brandon Ayuk, Kittle's numbers can get an uptick. Josh Allen lost his favorite target in Stephon Diggs. Who's going to fill that void? It could be Dalton Kincaid. Trey McBride had an awesome season last year with Kyler Murray. Evan Ingram, I think, had a top 3 season 2 seasons ago with the Jaguars. They just lost Calvin Ridley. Nick talked about Kyle Pitts. I have him on my list as well. So there's a lot of talent at tight end. There's some other guys I haven't even named, but a lot of talent at tight end. I could see a world where Kelce finishes at 4. And the hot take is that he finishes outside the top 3. And would I put money on this? Probably not. I think he'll finish at 2 or 3. I don't think he'll finish at 1, but I think throwing in a hot take in there, I think this is a year where he could possibly finish outside that top 3. So moving on, Nick, where are you at 30%? Your third hottest or third least hottest hot take, but
Still hot.
The viewers know what I mean.
Yeah. So this one is a take in itself, and you could call it hot or not, but I'm going to give a bunch of players with it, and it's not an individual person, but I'm saying that this is the year we turn the page on what I'm going to call the coulda, woulda, shoulda broken out. And there's some name value that everybody hears every year and says, new team, new quarterback, this player can break out. If you've been in the league for 3-4 years and we have not seen the breakout, I'm sorry, there's not enough reason to believe in the breakout. So I have a list of about 10 players here, and the hot take is that none of these guys maybe they'll break their ADP or be better than it, but none of them are going to be explosive league winners. And here's a short list of it. Jerry Jeudy going to the Browns. Everybody loves him. Terry McLaurin, he's been one of the more talented wide receivers, but going with a rookie quarterback. And his colleague, Jahan Dotson, who I've been fading both. Cortland Sutton, I've said it for 3 or 4 years. I think it's time to turn the page. I don't believe in Bo Nix. Deontay Johnson, someone that we say every year, safe floor. Could he get touchdowns? Could he have that ceiling? No, we have not seen it in 3 or 4 years now from Deontay. J.K. Dobbins, everyone's going to love him going to the Chargers. I don't. DeAndre Swift, every year we say he could finish in the top 5, and he has up and down and lets you down. Brian Robinson, Antonio Gibson. Brian Robinson still in Washington, Antonio Gibson not there anymore, but 2 guys every single year. It's the would have, could have, should have. And then to list a few more, Gabe Davis, Jameson Williams, Rashad Bateman, and the tight end I'll fade, Pat Freiermuth. Just a bunch of guys where every single year you find them in those mid to late rounds and say, this is the year they're going to hit, and they just continue to let you down. So the hot take is pretty much none of these guys are really going to win you that league like you thought they would.
For 30%, I finally have a positive one. If you draft Breece Hall in your first round, you are getting not only a league winner, but you are drafting the running back 1 at the end of week 18. This is such a lazy reasoning for the take, but I love this. I love trends. No running back is repeated as the running back 1 in back-to-back fantasy football seasons, and I believe it's over 20 years. It might have been LaDainian Tomlinson. I guess not. It'd be longer. It'd be a little bit shorter than 20 years. But no running back has repeated, and there's been a lot of talented running backs just in the past 10 years. You're looking at Dalvin Cook, McCaffrey, Adrian Peterson, Ezekiel Elliott, Saquon Barkley. There's been a lot of talent, Derrick Henry, a lot of talented running backs. And I know the talent for running back has gone down a little bit, but I'm looking at guys like Breece Hall. I'm looking at guys like I'm losing track of name on the Falcons. Bijan Robinson. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talent. So the reason why I believe in Breece Hall specifically is I believe he is the only other player not named Christian McCaffrey that could go 1,000 in the receiving and the rushing category. Aaron Rodgers is coming into the league at 41 years of age. He's coming off the big injury. I don't think we're going to see the gunslinger Aaron Rodgers. I think we'll see a little bit more cool, calm, and collected in terms of more checkdowns, more safer, get the first down. I think that's going to really benefit Breece Hall, and it benefited Breece Hall last year when the carousel of quarterbacks was playing. On top of that, I think the Jets, the recipe for success for Nick's football team over there is running the football, managing the clock, and playing defense. The Jets have the best defense in the league. They had it last year. They should have the best defense in the league this year. All Aaron Rodgers has to do is stay on the field, just stay healthy, and just score X amount of points, probably close to 17 or 20. When they get in the red zone, it's the Breece Hall show. I know Garrett Wilson will get his, other players will get theirs. It should be the Breece Hall show over there. I see no reason why he can't finish as the running back 1. I know McCaffrey will probably have another stellar season if he stays healthy, but so should Breece Hall, and that's why this is a take I'm actually pretty confident in. And in me and Nick's league, I'm drafting at 6. I will be thrilled if I could get Breece Hall at number 6. And I love the 6th spot this year. I love the 5 to 8 spots in leagues this year. I just think you're getting winners. You're going to get the scraps of whatever players your early drafters don't want, but you're going to have a really solid stud. And so anyway, 40%. What do you got?
I'm going to say that Calvin Ridley breaks the top 20. And I know people might think that's not.
That's a breakout player you were just talking about. That's really funny. I know you didn't have him in your list for a reason, but that he fits that category of that.
Well, last season, I mean, I would say he didn't hit his ADP, but he still finished like around, I want to say around the wide receiver 20 last year. And going to the Titans, people are expecting this massive decline. Well, they just paid him the bag. And Nick and I have always said, follow the money. If you pay a player like that and give him that much guaranteed money, you're not paying him not to use him. And for me, honestly, I know this is a fantasy football show, so I'm not going to get into real football hot takes. I think the Titans are going to be a lot better than people are expecting. We watched that roster compete. I know there's no Vrabel this year, but they brought in head coach Brian Callahan, the Bengals offensive coordinator, who helped build that dominant offense in Cincinnati. And now you look at Hopkins, Pollard, Ridley, and then Levis, who's an absolute gunslinger. And you're plugging Calvin Ridley last year, 136 targets, 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns, in with a quarterback. And I know this might be a hot take, who probably has a stronger arm than Trevor Lawrence. And it doesn't matter for interceptions. It doesn't matter for turnovers. It matters how many times can you catch the ball? How many times can you score? And that's what Calvin Ridley and his explosiveness is going to do. A new creative head coach, a creative offensive mind, a stronger armed quarterback, and all this opportunity for him. And it probably with a game script that benefits the passing game across the length of the season, I think Calvin Ridley is going to have a monster year. I know, like Nick said, I left him off the list a little bit, but I do think that I think Calvin Ridley's got a little bit of a switch here. I do think that he showed a lot last year, and he didn't deliver on a third-round ADP and Nick and I both said that's probably too high, but he did have a good fantasy season.
All right. Nick, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor because my computer is bugging a little bit. Can you please look up on Fantasy Pros current ADP rankings for quarterbacks? Because, and I kind of lost my notes. I don't know what's going on with my computer, but it happens. For my 40%, I think Kirk Cousins is going to have a stellar season, stellar enough to crack the top 10 fantasy football quarterbacks for the first time since 2017. He's always had really good offensive pieces around him, from Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, Dalvin Cook, Jordan Addison, Adam Thielen. And he's always been a really great stat sheet stuffer. It's one of the things I like about him. But I think with Atlanta, he has a better opportunity to really put all the pieces together for his puzzle and have one of the most complete seasons of his career. He was off to a great start last year. I think within 6 games, he had 2,500 yards and I think it was like 8 touchdowns or something like that, playing from behind a lot with the Vikings, and then he got hurt. He was putting up really good numbers, though. No, he's coming off the injury. He might start a little bit slow, but once he gets going, after they rely on Bijan Robinson for a couple games, he's going to sling that ball around with Atlanta. I think this is the Drake London breakout season. I think he had close to 1,000 yards last year. I don't have the numbers in front of me. It was like 800 yards and 2 or 3 touchdowns. So his numbers should all get an uptick. Same with Kyle Pitts. I see no reason why we can't see what he did with the Vikings that he could do now with the Falcons. Playing in a pretty favorable division. I think it's a very winnable division. All those division games should be close, but I think he could put up a lot of stats. He's one of those guys that could go for 4,000 yards and 30 touchdowns. And with a lot of injuries also coming to the league, you do have to factor injuries in there. I see no reason why he can't sneak into the top 10. Can you tell me where he's being drafted right now?
He's going off the board at the QB 19.
Yeah, there you go. So I think he's going to vastly outperform that. If you're somebody who's going to wait for a quarterback, why would you not take a shot on Kirk Cousins, who you know is going to really pad those stats? And that's kind of what fantasy football is. Doesn't matter how many games the Falcons win. It matters how many points they score with Kirk Cousins as your quarterback. And that's why I believe and my notes just popped back up. He has 4,000 yards in 7 of his last 9 seasons. So I see this will be his 10th season. He's going to go 8 for 10, and I see 30 plus touchdowns for Kirk Cousins. All right, 50%, Nick. So we're now we're almost at the halfway point, kind of. I guess 60% would be the tipping point. 50%.
I'm going to say the absolute steal of the draft in the later rounds is going to be Rashee Rice. I think that he is being so overlooked because of all the offseason stuff. And it makes sense, obviously, to fade a player because of that. But his fantasy production last year is getting way overlooked. Last year, from week 12 on, he was the wide receiver 4 in fantasy as a rookie. He averaged over 8 targets per game in the postseason. And right now, He's the 5th skill position player drafted on the Chiefs. He's going after Worthy, Pacheco, Hollywood Brown, and obviously Travis Kelce. Hollywood and Worthy are in the same exact range, and depending on the platform, I'm sure Rice is ranked higher somewhere. But for the most part, Fantasy Pro Sleeper, they have him number 3 of the wide receivers. And right now, it looks like the suspension is not going to happen this year. It's trending towards being the start of next season. So if that's the case, Rashee Rice, who right now is going off the board around the wide receiver 40, who was the wide receiver 4 for a 6-week stretch at the end of the last season and had over 8 targets per game in the postseason, and has Patrick Mahomes, probably the most talented quarterback in the history of football, on his team. Yeah, get out of here. I'm taking the sophomore breakout from Rashee Rice. I will happily watch him fall in drafts to me. I mean, this is an absolute league winner this late in the draft.
I'm glad you made this your hot take, because my hot take is actually my steal of the draft. And I'm going with Zach Moss being as this year's sleeper of the year. He's coming off the board as the running back 30. They're telling you, out of the 32 teams in the NFL, he is the 30th running back that they would want right now, which to me is absurd. And here's why. Jonathan Taylor was out X amount of games last year. I forget, 2 different injuries and whatever. And during that time, he racked up 794 yards and 5 touchdowns on the ground. He also had 2 receiving touchdowns, and I think it was 300 receiving yards or something along those lines. Not your most stellar season, but the Colts were kind of a bit of a dumpster fire, didn't have their rookie quarterback, was tough for them to compete. They are a team rebuilding, and Jonathan Taylor obviously was the 1A over there when he came back, took the role away from Zach Moss, but Zach Moss still cut into Jonathan Taylor's work. I know, as a Taylor owner who was very upset, he cut into his work because of how talented he was. The Bengals decided to let Joe Mixon walk, and I really do like Mixon. I'll talk about him later on in my hot takes. That's a little bit of a preview. And they decide to sign Zach Moss. So now he's going to a team that is going to be in the red zone a lot. They are going to score a lot of points. The Bengals will have a schedule where they're playing all those AFC North teams, and they'll be very, very tough games, but they're going to need to score points. They're going to need to control the clock. Joe Burrow's had a couple injuries. What's the best way to protect Joe Burrow and score points? Feed your running back. They're going to have so many opportunities. They do have a couple other backs on that team that could cut into his work, but I think it's his role to lose. They chose to pay him, follow the money. They didn't want to use Chris Evans. I know they have one other. I think it's Chris Evans or Zach Evans. Maybe I'm too minded on the Avengers right now, but they wanted to pay him. They wanted to use him. So I'm going to trust this as the running back 30 late in your drafts. If you're going 0 running back, take a guy who you know is going to play on an elite team. Take a guy who you know is going to have a lot of opportunity to score. Take a guy who you know is on a team that will be competing for the playoffs later in the league. The Bengals are going to want to win games later in the season. That means that your fantasy team is going to need to win games later in the season. That's a match made in heaven. I will take this in a 0 running back strategy, or even as my running back 2 or 3. I'm comfortable with that. Some other notes that I had here that I didn't even get to while I was rambling along. He's only going to be 27 by the end of the year. That's not old for a running back. Last year, Joe Mixon, or last 3 seasons with Joe Burrow, Joe Mixon, running back 6, running back 13, and running back 3. I will take those odds with the running back 1 in Cincinnati. 60%. We're over the tipping point. What do you got?
All right, so here's where I'm going to start to really upset some people, because
mine are super hot after this. They can all be like really hot takes. They're absurd.
So I've got here, I'm going with a major decline for one of the fan favorites. I'm going to say this is the year that Derrick Henry takes the fall. He's right now going inside the top 10, going into his age 30 season on a new team. Of all running backs in the last 20 years that have gotten a third prove it contract, like paid good money, none of them have broken out and beaten their ADP in fantasy. So the stats are telling you Derrick Henry will not be a dominant fantasy player like people think. And if you take a look at the rankings aren't just like, oh, I think Derrick Henry is going to be better than this player. The rankings come because a group of people put together a stat prediction for them, and it combines it like a fantasy season. So if we say we think a receiver is going to get 1,000 yards, they put that as 100 points, and all those points align, whatever. You get it. Right now, they're saying Derrick Henry is going to have 270 rushing attempts. That is not going to happen. That is an absurd amount. No Ravens running back in the last 5 years has had over 200 in a season. Some of that's due to injury, some of that's due to health. But the leading rusher for the team for these seasons has been Lamar Jackson. Lamar had close to 150 carries last year. You're telling me between Lamar, if he gets the 150 like he did last year, and Derrick Henry are going to have 420 carries in a season? It's not going to happen. And they're not going to wane off of the reigning MVP. It's not going to happen. They have not proven over 6 years that they're going to get away from that game plan. So is Derrick Henry probably going to be a good running back and fit the team well? Yes. But that does not mean you're good for fantasy. You can be great at football and bad at fantasy, or you could be great at fantasy and bad at football. And I'll get into one of those hot takes in two. But for me, it does not look like Derrick Henry is going to have a great season. The stats all point against it. And as one last nail in the coffin, the Ravens had 2 offensive guards and a tackle leave this offseason. So 3 less offensive linemen on what was an all-pro offensive line. A quarterback who's going to take the run more. He does not check it down because he can run. Like, everything says that Derrick Henry is in the worst possible situation he could have been for fantasy football. Not for real football. I'm sure him and Lamar will be terrifying, and I'm sure when Madden comes out, Nick's going to have fun running over
Henry. Nick would hate playing me.
I would hate playing against them.
But this is my recipe for success.
It is a recipe for Madden success, but unfortunately, I don't think it's a recipe for fantasy success.
Well, if it was our Madden league, Derrick Henry would be the best fantasy player of all time. My Ezekiel Elliott stats say that. All right. My 60%. The Texans and the Bears are going to have very fun offenses this year. At least we all think so. And for fantasy football, this can prove very, very challenging. But I'm here to tell you that it may not prove as challenging if you pick the right players. I'm looking at 6 wide receivers: Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, DJ Moore, and then I'm looking at Nico Collins, Tank Dell, and Stephon Diggs. I'm here to tell you that your odds of picking these players are actually better, and whichever one you end up with will probably be a pretty solid addition to your team, because 4 of those 6 wide receivers are going to wind up in the top 20. And the reason why I'm more confident in this is because 4 of those players ended up in the top 20 last year. Now, I know they weren't all on the same team, but you're looking at guys like Stephon Diggs, who finished last year.
I'd say 7 to 8.
I believe he was 8. The 2 in the top 10 were DJ Moore and Stephon Diggs, and the other 2 that were outside the top 10 were Keenan Allen and Nico Collins. Nico Collins, I think Nico finished in the top 10 now that I'm thinking about it.
He finished 12.
He was 12. Okay. Thank you for confirming that, because my computer is being a pain. So last year, 4 already did finish in the top 22 within the top 10. Now let's look at where they're being drafted and where your value could really be at. The highest right here is actually Nico Collins at wide receiver 16. I don't like that value, but I do think he could still finish within the top 20. But I like the other values, actually. DJ Moore at wide receiver 18, Stephon Diggs at wide receiver 28. My absolute favorite is Keenan Allen at wide receiver 34. And one of my hot takes was actually going to be that Keenan Allen is going to finish as the highest scoring player out of all 6 of these players. That's not one of my hot takes. That's one that I almost did use. So I do love Keenan Allen at wide receiver 34. Tank Dell at wide receiver 25. Forgot to mention his ADP before. And then Rome Odunze at wide receiver 44, looking at that in a keeper league or a dynasty league. So I think these offenses are going to score a lot of points. As for the Bears, I think they'll be playing from behind a lot. But if Caleb Williams is the quarterback that many think he is going to be, he should throw for a ton of yards and everybody should get theirs. CJ Stroud seems to have already proven himself. I think the Texans only got better, especially with the addition of Joe Mixon. This is going to be a very challenging offense to compete against for any NFL team. I don't care if you're the Chiefs. I don't care if you're the Niners. This will be a tough offense to play against. So I do see 4 of these receivers having enough of an opportunity to finish within the top 20. I mean, if both of these quarterbacks are throwing for close to 4,000 yards, each receiver can get at least 1,000 of them. If they're going to throw for 30 touchdowns each, the receivers are going to have close to 10 touchdowns. There's so much opportunity here for both these quarterbacks and both of these teams to have really good offensive seasons, and the receivers are really going to benefit. How would I rank these players? That's not in my hot takes. Maybe a future show. I'm not getting into that. But Keenan Allen is my favorite out of the 6. So that is my hot take. 70%. What do you got?
This one is going to sound like it's not as hot until I really break it down for you, so just bear with me. I think this year's rookie wide receivers are going to be more dominant than the 2020 wide receiver class. And for those of you that don't really know the breakdown of the classes, 2020 had Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, T. Higgins, Michael Pittman, Brandon Ayuk, Jerry Jeudy, and Henry Ruggs, even though he's not really playing anymore. But you look at 8 guys or 7, 8 guys that have had dominant fantasy seasons. CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, probably two of the top 4 wide receivers in football at the moment. T. Higgins, Pittman, Ayuk, 3 guys that every single season compete, league winners, depending on where you take them. I think that this year's class is going to be way more dominant than that whole class as a whole. And for fantasy purposes, I'm going to say that this rookie season is going to be better than the rookie season for that group of guys. Taking a look at the class, you look at Marvin Harrison Jr., who we all know he's going early second round, maybe late first round, depending on the league. He should be absolutely dominant. The other top guys, Nick mentioned him before, Odunze, Nabers. I don't truly believe in either of them as a fantasy talent yet. I do want to see a little bit more. But then I do think that there's a ton of league winners that are going to be later in the draft. The real bold one I'm going with is Brian Thomas. I think that he's going to plug into Calvin Ridley's role really well, and I think he's going to boom very early on. I think he's the one guy that really gets overlooked of the first round outside of Ricky Pearsall. Then you look at Xavier Worthy. I know he always liked the fast receiver for the Chiefs, but look at the tape. He looks great. Xavier Legette is going to plug right in to be the wide receiver 1 for the Panthers, and he's 6'3", 227. He's built like DK Metcalf. I'm sure he'll be fine. That's just your first round. That doesn't even include Ladd McConkey, who's going to Justin Herbert, Keon Coleman, who's going to be competing for the wide receiver 1 spot for Josh Allen, Roman Wilson, who's been getting a ton of hype out of Steelers camp. And then you have some other names like Luke McCaffrey, Brendan Rice, later in your draft. So I'm not saying that Brendan Rice, a 6th round wide receiver, is going to be the number 1 receiver, because that's ridiculous for me to say. But what I am telling you is I think that this is probably one of the most stacked rookie wide receiver classes that we've seen, and 2020 probably is the best in recent memory. So I'm telling you, as a whole, I think that there's going to be 4 to 5 of these wide receivers that I just named that are going to be league winners at their ADP.
So I can't tell how hot my hot take is, because I'm on the flip side. My hot take is that no rookie wide receiver is finishing in the top 15 this year.
Wow.
I'm not sure how hot that is, but I think there's too much talent at wide receiver. You're looking at the top of the board. You're looking at the Tyreek Hills, the CeeDee Lambs, the Justin Jeffersons. But then you go to the next tier. Then there's the Michael Pittmans, and then there's the T. Higginses, and there's the Brandon Ayuks, and the Deebo Samuels, and the DK Metcalfs. I should probably play again. I mean, I just named 6 players from 2 different teams, or combined from 2 teams that I really like. So to get in the top 15, you're gonna have a really, really good season from a wide receiver. I think Marvin Harrison has a good opportunity here. DeAndre Hopkins had great years with Kyler Murray, and that team will be playing from behind a lot. But again, there's just a lot of talent, and he's going to need to own up to that talent. We've seen a lot of receivers in the past couple of years not really break out until the second half of the year. My favorite being Amon-Ra St. Brown. Amon-Ra St. Brown during his rookie season from weeks 10 to 16, I think was the second highest scoring wide receiver in the league. But 1 to 10, he was getting dropped left and right. He was hanging out on the waiver wire. And I see red flags with a lot of these wide receivers from a fantasy perspective in the rookie season. I have the 2 pick in my dynasty league. I don't know what I'm doing because I do not like taking Malik Nabers. I'm worried about him. Daniel Jones looks terrible. We haven't seen anything that proves to me that Nabers is going to have a good opportunity with this quarterback. Daniel Jones might be a bottom 5 starter in the league. I'm worried about that. Rome Odunze is playing on a very stacked offense. I'm worried that he's behind Keenan Allen, DJ Moore. DeAndre Swift will be there as well. Caleb Williams can run the ball. They still have Cole Kmet. There's a lot of opportunity on that offense, and there's only so many mouths to feed. Rome Odunze, to me, is this year's Jackson Smith and Jigba. Super talented, but the wide receiver 3 on his team. I really like Brian Robinson. He's one of my favorite picks in drafts, but top 15, I don't see it. But in a dynasty league, would love to get him. Xavier Worthy competing with so much over there. Travis Kelce, Rashee Rice, Hollywood Brown. And I feel like every year somebody tries to predict the Chiefs wide receiver to break out, whether it was, can't even think of them off the top of my head because they
Darius
just
Toney,
Darius Toney,
MVS,
right,
Juju for a while,
right, and it never happened outside of Tyreek Hill. So let me give you the ADPs that they're currently going at right now. Marvin Harrison is the wide receiver 10. Malik Nabers, the wide receiver 24. Lade McConkey, wide receiver 44. Has an opportunity with Justin Herbert. Xavier Worthy, wide receiver 45. Roma Dunze, wide receiver 46. And if you're looking at wide receivers that actually cracked the top 15 in the rookie season in the past 4 years, there's only 3. Puka Nacua, 2023, wide receiver 6. Jamar Chase, wide receiver 5, 2021. And then Justin Jefferson, wide receiver 6, 2020. So your highest ranking rookie in the past 4 years is actually Jamar Chase, a wide receiver 5. I don't see any of these guys coming in the top 15. And that's a hot take because I think, gun to my head, I do think one does crack it, but that's why it's a hot take. And I think they're all very productive, and I think I'm going to love them in their sophomore seasons.
Yeah. Okay.
80%. What do you got?
This you could have made an argument is probably my hottest take. And
I'm looking at my bottom 3, and yeah, all 3 of mine could easily be my hottest take.
100%. So if you want to persecute me for saying this one's hotter than the next one or the next one, go ahead. But all 3 of these are hot takes, and these are probably my 3 strongest and things that I actually truly believe. This might be the hottest, but we're going to get into it. I think that there is a league-winning quarterback going off the board outside of the top 24. When he was healthy, he averaged 20 points per game. He has on a much more loaded offense this season compared to last. And for the first time in his career, he's going to have competent coaching. I'm saying Justin Fields is going to be a league winner this year for fantasy.
Wow.
Listen, you obviously cannot draft him because he's not the starting quarterback yet. But Russ is hurt. He looks great in camp. The reports are he gets along very well with the locker room, and we know that was an issue with Russell Wilson in Seattle and in Denver. And he's looked great. He's looked good. He's got starter reps. We're seeing throws to Pickens. We're seeing throws to Roman Wilson. We know that the offensive coordinator there, Arthur Smith, loves the mobility at quarterback and moving the pocket and running. That's exactly what Justin Fields can do. And like I said before, you do not need to be great at football to be great at fantasy football. Justin Fields may very well a year from now be looking for a third team, but that doesn't mean that he can't be fantasy productive. My prediction is at some point before Halloween, Justin Fields is going to take over the starting reins there. Russell Wilson might be a free agent at that point. They might just release him. And if that is the case, Justin Fields, I promise you now, will be my number 1 or 2 waiver wire pick that week. And I'm going to pound the desk and say that he is going to win you your fantasy championship.
All right. That's a hot one for sure. I think that I agree with you. It's probably your hottest one. My 80% is that Brock Bowers is going to break one of Mike Ditka's records that have stood for 50 plus years or whatever the number is. So Ditka's records as a rookie, 1,076 receiving yards, 12 touchdowns. I think Brock Bowers can do that. The Raiders, I think, have a terrible team. I think they are very, very bad. I think their coach is good. I think they're on the rebuild, and that's good for them. But I think in 2024, they are in a lot of trouble. I think they'll be playing behind in a lot of games. I think that opens up a lot of opportunities for Brock Bowers. I know they're going to have the stash at quarterback, Gardner Minshew. And I think he could target Bowers a lot. He had 700 plus yards and 6 plus touchdowns in all 3 years at Georgia. I know those numbers might not jump out to you, but Georgia was up 30 points by the second quarter in every single game for like the past 3 years. And maybe not when they played like Alabama, but like go look at the Georgia stats. Like they were up big. There was no reason to have Brock Bowers in there, trying to stat pad. So those stats are actually very good. Those stats are better than Sam Laporta's stats when he came out of Iowa last year, and he had 1,000 receiving yards and I believe 6 touchdowns. They also don't have a good running back on the Raiders. It's Devontae Adams and the rest, really. So this will actually take the load off Devontae Adams and help Devontae Adams a bit, and this will also help Brock Bowers a bit. Do I think this actually happens? No, it's a hot take, but I do think Brock Bowers is going to have an excellent year. I think he could have 600-700 receiving yards and 5 or 6 touchdowns. But the hot take is he's going to double one of those, and he breaks those at least one of those Mike Ditka records that has stood for the test of time. All right, 90%. What do you got?
Like I said, you could pick any of these 3 to be my hottest. This is probably the one that I think will outrage the most people. I think CJ Stroud's going to be a fantasy bust this season. I think everybody saw it last year, loved it. He's a great young quarterback. You'll love to watch him. He's got a great future in this league. He's got the it factor. He's fantastic on podcasts and will make a great analyst when his football career is done. But again, I don't think he's built for fantasy football. Last year, which in what was essentially a perfect rookie season, which you could argue was the greatest rookie season by a quarterback of all time, he finished as a QB 13, averaging the 10th most points per game at the position. Pocket quarterbacks with defensive coaches never dominate in fantasy football. I know the team's loaded. I'm sure they'll be great in actual football, but not in fantasy. If he were to get 12 more touchdowns.
Do you think he's a pocket quarterback, though?
Yes, he had less than 50 rushing attempts last year. That's about 3 per game. Okay. So if you just added 12 passing touchdowns to his stat line last year, keeps the turnovers low, matches the yards, matches everything else, he still would finish at the QB6 and not hit his ADP. They upgraded at running back. They went from Dameon Pierce and Devin Singletary, who could not move the ball, to Joe Mixon, who has been, as Nick has mentioned earlier, great as a running back and great on the ground. He is going to get rushing touchdowns and take them away from Stroud in that short passing game. Right now, he's going off the board in the top 5 at 5, but a lot of people still are taking him over Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes. On top of that, he has the 7th toughest schedule in fantasy football, and then he finishes your playoffs going to Arrowhead in the freezing cold and then hosting the Baltimore Ravens, who decimated him in the playoffs. And to even further it, if you're someone that takes quarterback early and you take CJ Stroud, typically you're going to be fighting for a playoff spot near the end. Week 14 before your playoffs, he is on a bye. It is like a total recipe and mismatch of like perfect. I love CJ Stroud, by the way. I think he's phenomenal. I think he's going to be great. I think he's going to be one of the best 5 quarterbacks in the league for the next decade-ish. But I do not think that he is going to be good for fantasy. Just like we say Jared Goff, Tua, Kirk Cousins, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady. Look at all those great pocket quarterbacks. They are great for football. They fill out the stat sheets, but they never finish in the top 5 in fantasy football because pocket quarterbacks do not finish that high. It's as plain and simple as that.
I have a quarterback as well, and you mentioned possibly the best rookie season ever. I think Caleb Williams is going to have the best rookie season ever as a fantasy quarterback. Now, the best fantasy season quarterback in the past 20 years, so I am assuming that it's ever at this point, was Mr. Cam Newton, 369 points in 2011. Very nice. 4,051 passing yards, 21 passing touchdowns, 17 interceptions, 706 rushing yards, and 14 rushing touchdowns. Now, that is where Caleb Williams probably does fall short. And I know I'm backtracking on the take a little bit. That 14 touchdowns is going to be, the 14 rushing touchdowns is going to be what holds Caleb Williams back a little bit. But I think the talent is there. I think the team is there. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. Caleb Williams is going to a Bears team, and a lot of rookies don't go to a good team, especially the number 1 overall pick. The Bears shouldn't be a bad football team. Their defense last year was top 10 in scoring defense. They were the anchor of that team last year. On top of that, the Bears drafted Rome Odunze, so they put another piece with Caleb Williams, who would have played with DJ Moore and Cole Kmet, who were already good pieces for a rookie to go into. Trevor Lawrence came into nothing with the Jaguars. I can't tell you who his wide receiver 1 was. I don't think it was Christian Kirk. I think they signed him the second year. I can't tell you who Trevor Lawrence is throwing to his rookie season. I could go down the list of everybody who's been drafted number 1 overall in the past 10 years. And just with DJ Moore and Cole Kmet, I think Caleb Williams is going into a better situation. And then they trade for Keenan Allen, who just had his best statistical season of his career. I don't care what his age says. That's Mr. Reliable right there. Not only is Mr. Reliable, he can help out Rome Odunze. He has so much talent. And aside from the running backs, we want to take the load off of him. Here's DeAndre Swift, who they put some money into as well. I'm still worried about the offensive line because the Bears' offensive line is still atrocious. But Caleb Williams has the recipe for success on his offense. He can throw for 4,000 yards like Cam Newton did, like Andrew Luck did in 2012. I think he could throw for 35 plus touchdowns, 30 plus touchdowns. I think he could have one of those seasons. And I did just say the Bears are going to compete, but I do think they will be behind in a lot of games. Do I think they're going to win 7-8 games? Possibly, but I still think they will be behind, which means more passing opportunities for Caleb Williams. Lastly, the rushing factor in 2 seasons at USC, he totaled 524 rushing yards, which isn't a lot, but he did also total 22 rushing touchdowns, which factors out to 11 rushing touchdowns per year. Do I think he's going to get 11 his rookie season in the NFL? No. But if he could get 5 or 6 with the passing yards and the passing touchdowns, he could pass Cam Newton. I'm just saying. So that's why it's a super duper hot take. But I think he's worth a draft at the quarterback 15. I think he's worth taking it as your backup quarterback. I see no reason not to take a shot on him when there's so much upside. All right. 100%. What do you got?
I'm going to say that the best wide receiver in football, Justin Jefferson, finishes outside of the top 10 this season. Obviously, there's no doubt in the talent that is Justin Jefferson, but right now he's going into one of the 5 worst quarterback situations in all of football with Sam Darnold as the starter. Last year, without Kirk Cousins, he averaged less than 16 points per game, and he's currently going off the board as the wide receiver 3. His talent, his targets, they're going to give him a floor, but the inconsistent quarterback play is going to lead to inconsistent fantasy numbers. Now I want to play out two hypotheticals. The best case scenario for the rookie quarterbacks of the Minnesota Vikings and the worst case scenario. So in a perfect world, McCarthy will be the starter very early on. And let's say he is lucky enough to match CJ Stroud's great rookie season, which would be a miracle. He would go for 4,000 yards and 23 touchdowns to spread among Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, receiving running back Aaron Jones, and Jordan Addison. Exactly similar to CJ Stroud. And I would say that Justin Jefferson would clearly be the Nico Collins in this situation, who finished as the wide receiver 12 in fantasy. That's my best case scenario. The worst case scenario, and the more likely, is that Sam Darnold is the starter for a good portion of the season. McCarthy takes over at some point, and then you just kind of got to wait and see what they do. But if you want to bet on how good they're going to be as a quarterback, I'm going to bet on the under, because the fact of the matter is last year, 10 teams in the league, and this is kind of surprising, averaged less than 200 passing yards per game. If you had to bet on it, I would say that Sam Darnold, JJ McCarthy, probably more likely to be bottom 10 than top 10. So if you're telling me that your quarterbacks in a single game in passing will have less than 200 yards per game, there is absolutely no way Justin Jefferson hits his ADP. He's going to fall very short of it, and my guess is he's going to be outside the top 10. For him to hit his ADP, and if you just took the stats to plug it in to beat the wide receiver 3 from last season, Amon-Ra, he would need a total of 1,500 yards, 10 touchdowns, and 120 catches. That is not possible with this quarterback play. And the reason I'm calling it the hottest take is because for me to say the best wide receiver in football is not going to finish top 10 in fantasy would be unprecedented to happen without an injury. Even if Justin Jefferson is fully healthy, I don't think that there is an outcome where he hits this ADP. And I don't think there's an outcome where he finishes top 5. Maybe he finishes 6 to 10, but I would lean on the side of outside the top 10 based off what I saw from CJ Stroud last year with Nico Collins.
All right. I don't know if it's my hottest take, but I still think it's a very, very hot take. We saw a lot of starting running backs change teams this year. I think there was a total of 10 of them or something like that. I think 4 running backs on new teams will crack the top 10 in fantasy football. I have 6 guys here that I would like to present evidence for. 2 of them were in the top 10 last year, but I'll still present some evidence. Nick did not like Derrick Henry. I like Derrick Henry. I think Derrick Henry is going to get a lot of work in the red zone. I think the Ravens have been searching for a running back for years. They drafted J.K. Dobbins high. Didn't work out for many years. Gus Edwards was fine, wasn't cutting it. I think they've been searching for a running back to pair with Lamar Jackson to make the ultimate dual threat. And this year they said, screw it. This guy's a free agent. He's a proven talent. Let's go get him. Derrick Henry finished last year as the running back 8 on a bad Titans team who did not score a lot of points, going to a Ravens team who is going to score a lot of points. I do understand Nick's points. I don't disagree with them, but I think Derrick Henry can land in the top 10, even if it's in the back half. Joe Mixon finished last year with a running back 6, going from a high-scoring team to another high-scoring team, now with a defensive coach. They're going to want to control the clock. They're going to want to play a little bit of defense. For the Texans to actually succeed this year and make that next leap, they're going to have to play complete football, and that doesn't mean scoring 40 points a game. That does mean controlling the clock a little bit. They paid him. They wanted to pay him. I like following the money, and that's why I do like a lot of these running backs. So I will bank on Joe Mixon also having an opportunity to crack that top 10. I'm starting off with my favorite of the list, and that's Saquon Barkley, who is being drafted, who finished last year, I believe, at running back 13. Last year with the Giants scored 266 total points and 29 touchdowns. The Eagles scored 433 points, almost 200 more points, and 49 touchdowns. That is 20 more touchdowns available to Saquon Barkley. I repeat, that is 20 more touchdowns to be spread out to Saquon Barkley. Now, I know that guys like A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith will get theirs. There is 20 more touchdowns to go to Saquon Barkley now. That is how much offense is going to go to Saquon Barkley. The Eagles will not play from behind a lot of games. They'll either compete in the game or they'll win the game, I believe, because they're one of the top teams in the league. If they are up, they will run Saquon Barkley. This is the best offense Saquon has ever played with. There are so many pieces around him, and he's not going to have loaded boxes either. That's another thing. You can't load the box on Saquon Barkley, because if you load the box, A.J. Brown is going 60 yards for a touchdown. There's so much upside for Saquon Barkley this season, and a lot of people, I raised both my hands, have faded him due to injuries in the past. I can't fade Saquon this year because of the opportunity that he does have with the Eagles. He could have arguably his best fantasy football season ever. Next up, I have a running back that I don't really like, who's being drafted right now, or he finished last year as running back 14 with the Cowboys in what a lot of people call the down season. I think I called them my biggest bust out of any of my draft picks. Going to a revamped offense with the Titans. He'll be playing with DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd, and I also believe Deontay Johnson is over there, even though I didn't have him listed. Another guy now you can't load the box against, but this is also a guy who's a good check down running back. Derrick Henry, not a good check down running back. Tony Pollard, good check down running back. It's a good opportunity for a young quarterback in Will Levis, who I think is playing in his second or third year. If the Titans want to play mistake-free football, which I think is really important for them, I think Tony Pollard is going to be a big piece. And again, follow the money. They paid him a big amount of money. I don't have the contract in front of me, but they did pay him a lot of money. Next, I have Josh Jacobs, running back 28. That's what he finished last year as running back 28 with the Raiders. He's going to a better team. I think a lot of people are expecting a big season from Jordan Love and the Packers. They didn't add anybody to play receiver, but they added a running back. They lost Aaron Jones. I think they really upgraded here with Josh Jacobs, who was a top 5 running back 2 seasons ago with the Raiders. He's a proven bulldozer who'll have a lot of red zone opportunity. For the fact that they paid him, they don't have a lot of confidence in A.J. Dillon. I think they're fine with A.J. Dillon being a backup, but they don't want to play with that experiment. They want to use Josh Jacobs. He can catch balls as well, so it could be a check down guy for Jordan Love. I think he'll have a lot of red zone opportunity. I don't think they want Jordan Love to throw for 4,000 yards. They'll be ecstatic if he does, but I don't think the recipe for success for the Packers winning that division is Jordan Love throwing for 4,000 yards and 50 touchdowns. I think, again, it's managing the clock, letting Jordan Love play mistake-free football, and letting Josh Jacobs kind of be the motor for that engine. Last running back I have here, this is my least likely one that I think could top the top 10, but I'm still going to throw him in there because he is very productive. Running back 37 last year with the Packers was Aaron Jones, now going to the Vikings. No matter who is playing quarterback, they'll be playing from behind. This is a check down king. Put that crown on his head. Aaron Jones catches a lot of balls. I see a lot of dropbacks from Sam Darnold or J.J. McCarthy, especially if J.J.'s the quarterback. Dump off to Aaron Jones. Dump off to Aaron Jones. Dump off to Aaron Jones. That's a lot of PPR points from you. He has 47 receptions in 4 of his last 5 seasons. I think he could get 50 plus this year. I think he could swing a couple touchdowns into the end zone as well. They'll be playing from behind a lot. I see a lot of opportunity there. How many of these guys do I think actually crack the top 10? I think I could say 3 out of 6. I think it's very possible, but my hot take is that 4 of these running backs on new teams are going to end up finishing within the top 10. And I think as of right now, only 2 of them are being drafted within the top 10, being Derrick Henry And that might be it. That might be the only, and Barkley as well. I think 2 of them might be being drafted in the top 10 at the moment. Fantasy Pros decided not to work for me this morning, so I can't double check that. But that is my 100% hot take. So, Nick, I'll ask you this question, then you could ask me, what do you think was my least hottest take, and what do you think was my hottest take?
Oh, man, we've been recording for about 50 minutes now, and I got to remember your hot takes.
I can read them off to you if needed.
Yeah, go for it. Quick
All right,
summary.
so I'm going 10 to 100. Pat Mahomes will not finish as a top 5 quarterback. Kelce will not finish as a top 3 tight end. Breece Hall will finish as the running back 1. Kirk Cousins finishes as a top 10 quarterback. Zach Moss is your sleeper of the year. 4 out of 6 of the Bears-Texans receivers finish in the top 20. No rookie wide receiver will finish within the top 15. Brock Bowers breaks one of Mike Ditka's rookie records. Caleb Williams finishes with the best rookie season ever as a fantasy quarterback. And then 4 of the newer running backs on new teams will finish within the top 10.
So I think Caleb is going to have a phenomenal rookie season. For him to break Cam Newton's record as a rookie quarterback would be absolutely astronomical. And I do think, like you said, I'm backing Caleb. I think he's going to be a great quarterback, great rookie quarterback, great fantasy quarterback. But I don't know if he's going to be Cam Newton. Cam Newton was just on a different level. That I think is definitely your hottest take.
I toyed around with that a lot. That was 100% at one point. Those last 3, I tinkered a lot with a lot.
And then your least hot take, I would say Mahomes. I mean, I know it's down there, but Mahomes for fantasy he just hasn't hit the numbers. He really hasn't.
Yep. Needed one fastball. Okay. I know my 100% for you is got to be Justin Fields because he's not starting at the moment. And I'm not sure he's going to start. So that definitely is 100%, but I think your Jefferson take definitely is a close number 2. For your 10%, I'm trying to think, can you just read off your first 5?
So Najee Harris bounced back top 12 season. Kyle Pitts finishes top 15.
Kyle Pitts top 15 is a tight end. Top 5. I'll say that one. You don't even need to read them off because I'm pretty confident Kyle Pitts. I think he finishes top 5. So there you go. If you see our graphics on our social media channels, PrimeTimeFFPod, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook is Primetime Fantasy Podcast. Make sure to follow that Facebook page, please, if you haven't already. We do need to get to a certain number to stream on Facebook this season due to new rules. So please follow that Facebook page if you haven't already. Comment on our social media pages what you think of our hot takes, maybe what you think is the hottest one, what you think is the least hottest one, what you think is actually possible. Just don't comment like, "Oh, that's not going to happen," because these are hot takes, and that's a stupid comment, and that's not a needed that is not a needed comment because it is a hot take for a reason. If you looked me in the face and told me, "I think Jerry Jeudy is going to break every receiving record possible," I'd say probably won't happen. But you know what? If that's your 100% hot take, that's what it is. So that's not a helpful comment. But please engage in the conversation with us and let us know what you think of the hot takes. On our social media channels. If you enjoyed the show and you're listening on your favorite audio streaming platform, make sure to subscribe to the show. We'd appreciate that. If you're an Apple, a 5-star rating would also be huge. If you're watching and listening to the show on our YouTube channel, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and hit that bell icon so you're notified every single time we post a new video or go live, which we will be live Sundays at a certain time, probably earlier in the morning. During the football season, we love answering your fantasy football questions on Sunday mornings. So we'll have a lot of fun with that. Aside from that, thank you for listening, watching, and or supporting, and you'll hear from us very soon.